explain it, but if it's Joseph Smith again making it up on the fly in 2 months, how do you remember this language that reoccurs in different legal cases and so on?
Throughout the course of the Book of Mormon,
yes.
even. That was the other
and we
thing
know
that
one of the
impressed
characteristics of legal language is the sort of conservatism that, you still use Latin terms in American legal cases. Latin has never been spoken here in the United States, but it's the history of the law that still lives on. There's sort of fossilized legal terms and so on. That's true among the Nephites, too. And you find it scattered across the Book of Mormon. Joseph Smith probably never even noticed it. It almost needs a modern computer to find it or to realize that it's there. You start realizing that the same formula has occurred in several places. It is a formula.
and it's there.
And it's there. And it's reflecting some underlying legal reality or legal code.
Well, in view of that consistency, isn't it remarkable, too, that every single legal case, and he found dozens of them, has its own peculiar characteristics that actually do match ancient characteristics in that particular type of situation.
Right. Much more
That's what astonished me about it.
The surface reading of the Book of Mormon is it's the guys in the white hats against the guys in black hats. And it's this kind of simple cowboys and Indians story. And the good guys win. Actually, they don't. They lose.
Don't, do they?
They become bad and they lose. It's much more sophisticated when you start looking at it carefully than it seems at first glance. And so the initial question was, have we exhausted the Book of Mormon? My conviction is, no, we're never going to do that. I mean, a really great piece of writing, and I think the Book of Mormon is that. It could be superficially dismissed as simplistic and there's nothing worth reading there. The more you get into it, the more you realize there are depths beneath depths beneath depths, and you're never going to get to the bottom of it. You're always going to find new things. You're always going to find patterns you hadn't noticed before. And when someone else points it out to you, your reaction will be, good grief.
Why didn't I see that before?
I didn't see it. But once it's pointed out to you, you see it. And then you can never read it again the same way.
That's correct. And, what's remarkable is this. Now, how many years has the Journal of Book of Mormon studies been going on?
Oh, gosh, that's been at it for about 15 years. A little more than 15 or 17, something like that.
The astonishing thing is, if it's going stale, if Joseph Smith really made it up, how many dozens of scholars and just regular lay people are contributing to the Journal of Book of Mormon studies? You have the Farms Review of books. You have all of these outlets. It has become, am I exaggerating if I say it has become literally tens of thousands of pages of materials?
Yeah, it has. Yeah.
And it's still going.
Still going. And one of the areas that I'm kind of excited about, we're just beginning to see little bits of it, but I'm looking forward to seeing how people read it from other cultures, what they see in it, coming from a background very different than, say, the Wasatch Front or, Mormon country kind of approach to the Book of Mormon. Because we talk to one another and we sort of see things in similar ways. Even so, a lot of us are discovering new things in the Book of Mormon. But I want to find people from other cultures who read it a different way. I heard a speech in Beirut a number of years ago from a fellow I'm still trying to track down, who I tried to approach him then and he got away and I haven't been able to find him since. He was a convert to the church with a PhD in Middle Eastern Studies from the Sorbonne, the University of Paris, native speaker of Arabic. He got up and gave a marvelous talk in sacrament meeting in the Beirut branch about reading the Book of Mormon through Arab eyes and how as he read the book, he realized this was a Near Eastern book. It had characteristics in it that were Near Eastern. Now, that's something I might say, but it's really nice to hear it from an educated academic who's an Arab, who lives in the Middle East.
And if Joseph Smith really did just absorb the 19th century American themes...
Yeah. People say, it's a 19th century book, American, written by a Yankee, that's all it could be. Well, here's this Arab academic with a PhD from the University of Paris who was struck by it and converted by the perception this is a Middle Eastern book, this is not an American book.
That is fascinating.
So, but there are other people out there coming from different backgrounds. I remember years ago reading an account in the Church News of a shepherd from England, I think, who one of the things that struck him was the way shepherds were described in the Book of Mormon. The shepherd doesn't drive the flock forward, he leads the flock, and the sheep hear his voice and so on. And this struck him as authentic because Western shepherds don't do that. That's not the way they do it. They have their dogs and so on, and they kind of push the sheep ahead of them and watch them. But a Near Eastern shepherd, he's a professional shepherd. He said, now, I don't even know if this is true, but this was his perception. And I thought, see, somebody coming from almost any background is going to read the Book of Mormon differently than I do. And I want to hear more. Sometimes people ask, well, I'm not a professionally trained scholar. Do I have anything to contribute? Of course you do. If your standpoint is different, if your viewpoint is different, you may see something I would never see. And so I want to hear what you see in the text that I don't see. Tell me what's there.
Everyone has something to contribute.
Yeah,
Everyone
yeah.
has something to learn.
Yeah, because nobody reads it exactly
Marvel
the same
at
way
it.
as anybody else does. So, let people write this up. If you see something, people will come to me and say, well, I noticed this. Should I write this up? Yes. Now, it may or may not pan out. But the more we have people trying to do that, the more we're going to see. Because none of us sees it all. Every one of us comes from a certain background, and we're equipped to see certain things, and we won't see other things. But somebody else may see something I wouldn't notice in a million years.
This is so true because as I've spent my years through reading all the Farms Reviews and the Journal of Book of Mormon Studies, which is really exciting for me and all that, then all of a sudden this upstart pseudo-Mormon scholar Brant Gardner comes up with a 6-volume commentary, and there's thousands of pages, and every page I'm saying, oh my, I didn't think of it that way. Oh, I never looked at it that way.
Because he comes at it from a different angle.
It is just so fascinating that there's so much to it. So
and I'm just convinced that we can do that forever. That people who people have different training, different background, different professional backgrounds.
It doesn't matter
life
whether it's
stories.
scientific or economic.
No, it doesn't matter at all because you'll see something that I won't. Just because, well, look.
So how could
this
Joseph
is even
Smith
true.
have had that broadness?
Yeah, good question.
I mean, truly.
This is true across your own life. You will change, and you will read the scriptures differently. I mean, I've had the experience. I've got an old set of scriptures that I bought when I went off to college at 17, and I've got annotations in the margins. And I look at some of those annotations now, and I think, who was this idiot? And I'll notice that I underline one passage, but there's a passage right beside it that now strikes me as one of the most brilliant in all of Scripture. It's actually happens many times, but I didn't even notice it at 17. But later on, when my life experiences are different and I've got different questions, suddenly that scripture just jumps out at me. So, different people will see it differently, but you too will see it differently as you move through your life. And I remember hearing Elder Packer, President Packer, say about rereading the scriptures. He said, there are passages that have come to mean a lot to him that he never noticed when he was younger. And he says when he rereads the scriptures, he'll suddenly say, I know that verse wasn't there when I read this the last time.
And this is Elder Packer, one of the most best scriptorians on the planet.
Well, of course the passage was always there, but it just didn't hit you. Now it does, because you've got a different life situation. You see it differently. So, but we need to find Latin Americans who read the Book of Mormon and write about it. Europeans, Asians. I want to know what they see in the Book of Mormon, what speaks to them that I haven't noticed. Because if they can point it out to me, maybe it'll speak to me.
Oh, that's very interesting. Well, we'll get the word out. We'll tell them all.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
let 1,000 flowers
YouTube.
bloom. To borrow a very unfortunate slogan from Mao in China.
Well, let's not quote just anybody.
But, I remember one of the discoveries that really opened things up for me was to find a manuscript in the archives or the files of the Jerusalem branch when I was first living there as a student. And it was a paper by John Twetness about the Nephite Feast of Tabernacles. King Benjamin's address is a Feast of Tabernacles address. And I read it, and I thought, good grief, of course. I mean, I've never been able to read the text since then without seeing that, but I've never seen it before.
No, that's right. John
this was sitting at that point, unpublished, in a kind of mimeograph version in a file.
He just kind of found something, wrote it up, and
he
left
wrote it up
there.
and went nowhere. So one of the reasons Farms was invented was to share that kind of thing.
Awesome.
Because, of course, once that's pointed out to you, then you read the text totally differently. And I see that as sort of that's one illustration, but for me it was a pivotal one in my life. But I know that other people can do that I can pick up something they've written and go, good grief, of course. Of course, I wouldn't have ever seen it, but now I see it. And it changes the whole way I read a text. Noel Reynolds reading 1 Nephi from his background as a political scientist, political philosopher. He sees 1 Nephi as Nephi's defense, his apologia for his seizing political power, when it should have been the older brother who succeeded. And so Nephi writes 1 Nephi to defend his right to rule against Lamanite attack. It's an ideological document. And, once you see it that way, then you notice a whole lot of things there. That, of course, this is why Nephi is saying this. It's why there's this sort of propagandistic element to it. My brothers murmured, but I, Nephi, did not. He's making the point, who is the real heir of my father? I am. not layman, not Lemuel. You know, he's
Very
having to defend the
interesting.
fact that he, in effect, from their standpoint, stole the right to rule.
And that's what the later Lamanites said, too.
Yeah,
That was their standpoint. That's
So, you know,
interesting.
he comes at it as a political scientist, and he sees something I
So we
probably
see
never would have
so
thought
we
of.
see the actual what